Step into a realm where empathy and communication thrive, and where we explore the foundations of strong and affectionate connections. Perched on the windowsill, Stella found herself entangled in a labyrinth of thoughts, all centered around the impending reality of graduating from high school. The familiar sight of the schoolyard below stirred a mixture of nostalgia and apprehension within her. Her brow furrowed with concentration as she gazed into the distance, wrestling with an uncertain future. Graduation was no longer a distant event on the horizon, it was approaching with each passing day, like a colossal wave ready to sweep her into the world beyond the protective walls of her school. Yet, despite countless hours pondering this inevitable event, Stella's path after graduation remained veiled in mystery. Her future seemed like an expansive blank canvas, filled with both daunting possibilities and opportunities, a puzzle waiting for its pieces to be discovered. The dream of attending college remained elusive for Stella, hidden behind the formidable gate of financial constraints. She lived on a tight budget that left little room for the luxuries of daily life, let alone the high cost of higher education. Stella's father, Samuel, had been struggling since being laid off from his job as a truck driver. He sought solace in alcohol, drowning his sorrows in the company of his laid-off trucker friends. Together, they huddled, attempting to blur the harsh edges of reality at the bottom of empty beer bottles. Samuel's employment status had been unstable for over a year, and though he managed to pick up odd jobs, they only seemed to fuel his burgeoning alcoholism. Stella watched with a heavy heart as her father sank deeper into this self-destructive routine. A feeling of helplessness gnawed at her, as she witnessed him becoming more comfortable with this harmful lifestyle. She longed to intervene, but fear of backlash during his drunken stupors held her back from discussing his drinking problem when he was sober. Her father's repetitive cycle of excessive drinking, coupled with empty promises of sobriety, resembled a broken record, endlessly replaying with no resolution in sight. As their financial situation worsened, desperation pushed Samuel to sell off household items, one by one, gradually stripping away the comforts of their once cozy home. His self-destructive lifestyle not only eroded him but also eroded the very fabric of their sanctuary. Stella's mother, Hazel, faced her own struggles as she coped with a disability, partially alleviated by modest benefits she received. To supplement her income, she toiled long hours as a janitor, but in the harsh current economy, her pay barely made ends meet. Seeking refuge from the grueling reality, Hazel, too, turned to alcohol as a temporary escape, mirroring her husband's unfortunate habit. As Hazel succumbed to alcohol, Stella felt her resentment intensify, even surpassing her frustration with her father. Perhaps what hurt most was the sense of disappointment. Her beloved mother had fallen into the same destructive patterns as her father. Witnessing her mother in a drunken haze, her once caring demeanor obscured by alcohol's grip, proved to be a bitter pill for Stella to swallow. Yet, despite her frustration, a deep sense of pity for her parents began to emerge within Stella. Once, they had been hard-working coal miners, a time when life held greater promise. Their household had been filled with smiles, hearty laughter, and a sense of security that stemmed from a life well lived. However, when the coal mine where they worked shuttered its doors, their world crumbled. The mine had not only provided their livelihood but also their identity and purpose. Its closure catapulted their lives into uncertainty and chaos, ultimately leading them to their current predicament. Stella yearned for the days of old, when her parents were not just functional, but genuinely happy. Those were the times before alcohol took control of their lives, before they became mere shadows of their former selves. She longed for the days when her family stood whole, and life felt simple and full of sweetness. Yet, the once vibrant tapestry of their family life had gradually unraveled, leaving behind a tangled mess of threads fraying under the weight of their harsh circumstances. While other families seemed to adapt and navigate the challenges of life with ease, Stella's family appeared stuck in a tumultuous current of dysfunction, struggling to find stable ground. She struggled to recall the last time she wore clothes that weren't hand-me-downs or the result of a charitable act. Her wardrobe became a stark reflection of their difficult financial situation, each worn seam and faded color serving as a reminder of their hardship. In contrast, her peers at school seemed to live in an entirely different world, coming from families that had weathered the changing economy with success. Despite facing similar hardships, these families had somehow managed to adjust, adapt, and even flourish. They emerged from their trials stronger and more resilient, wearing their recovery as a badge of honor. Stella couldn't help but feel a pang of envy, yearning for a life that seemed just out of her grasp. "Stella, what's wrong?" A familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. She looked up to see Lucas, her classmate, who brought a breath of fresh air to her circle. Lucas was someone who didn't view the world through the lens of social and financial inequality. "Just waiting for the class meeting to start," Stella replied, mustering a faint smile. Unfazed by her melancholy, Lucas smoothly took the seat beside her. "Well, I was heading home, but I seem to be fashionably late. I guess I'll stick around," he said with a playful chuckle. Stella couldn't help but smile at his character. "Aren't you even a little curious about the graduation party plans? It's a once-in-a-lifetime milestone event, you know." Lucas shrugged nonchalantly. "Honestly, not really. I'm more focused on getting that diploma and getting out of this place. Look around, it hardly feels like a school anymore." Stella playfully rolled her eyes, attempting to lighten the mood. "Oh, come on, Lucas. Don't be so serious and gloomy. We're still kids, after all. Save that seriousness for after the graduation party. Just relax and enjoy the moment." A soft smile crossed Lucas' face. He had harbored deep affection for Stella for some time, always finding ways to show he cared. He sought to brighten her day and make life a bit easier for her, all while maintaining a casual demeanor to avoid drawing too much attention to himself. Subtly, he would accidentally buy 2 candy bars, expertly unwrapping one in front of her, ensuring she noticed. He would then feign surprise, claiming he bought 2 for later, before offering her one. Despite living on the other side of town, Lucas never missed a chance to give Stella a ride home, ensuring she had safe and comfortable transportation. His acts of kindness were consistent and subtle, his intentions concealed by his easygoing nature. Unbeknownst to many, he quietly supported Stella in any way he could, serving as a silent guardian in the midst of her tumultuous life. Lucas had a keen awareness of Stella's fiercely independent spirit and fiery temper. He approached her with great care, finely calibrating his actions to avoid inadvertently offending or upsetting her. Whenever he offered help, it was done in a casual manner, as if coincidental acts of kindness, showcasing his deep understanding of Stella's pride and resilience. In his unassuming way, Lucas went above and beyond to make Stella's life a little easier while always respecting her personal boundaries. His kindness was draped in friendly gestures, allowing Stella to accept his assistance without feeling pitted or patronized. This delicate balance spoke volumes about his genuine understanding and care for her. "Well, if you insist that the graduation party is important, can I expect to share a dance with you?" Lucas asked, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Stella laughed, her mood instantly lifted by his light-hearted suggestion. "You can count on 2 dances," she replied, matching his playful tone. These little moments of easy banter and shared laughter were what made their friendship so precious to Stella. Amidst the dark and uncertain world surrounding them, the simple joy of companionship served as a warm beacon of hope. As the teacher in charge of organizing the details entered, followed by a group of enthusiastic students, Stella listened intently to the plans for the grand graduation party. The excitement exceeded anything she had imagined, filling her with unexpected joy and anticipation. Then Mrs. Rivera, her teacher, began assigning tasks to the students. Stella eagerly awaited her turn, ready to lend a hand in the preparations. "Mrs. Rivera, can I help?" she asked hopefully, her voice reflecting a quiet eagerness. Mrs. Rivera's condescending grin sent a wave of humiliation through Stella, as her teacher's sarcastic words dripped with disdain. "I'm not even sure what you could do to help, Stella. Weren't you planning to skip the party? And let's not forget the matter of affording a dress, something I doubt you can manage." "Just an observation, of course." Stella's face flushed with embarrassment, her peers' laughter echoing in her ears, magnifying her vulnerability. In that moment, she felt incredibly small and exposed, her financial struggles laid bare for everyone to see. With her pride wounded but still intact, Stella couldn't bear the discomfort any longer and swiftly left the classroom, the silence following her exit punctuating the tension. Lucas, being the devoted friend he was, immediately rose and followed her, determined to offer support. "Lucas, where are you going?" Mrs. Rivera's voice rang out, sharp with authority. "Stay here. We have a special task for you. Don't leave." But Lucas stopped in his tracks, his eyes meeting the teacher's with unexpected resolve. "Take your program and go to hell," he replied, before heading for the door. Mrs. Rivera's eyes widened at Lucas's defiance. He was not just any student, he was the star student, integral to the success of the party. Moreover, his father, Mr. Anthony Cox, was the main sponsor of the event, having promised surprise gifts for the teachers. Lucas's attendance was crucial. "Mr. Anthony Cox, return to your seat immediately." Mrs. Rivera's order reverberated through the room, but Lucas didn't even spare her a glance. With a decisive slam, he exited the room, leaving behind an agitated Mrs. Rivera. In his actions, Lucas showed his unwavering support for Stella, standing up against Mrs. Rivera's arrogance and insensitivity. His loyalty extended beyond mere friendship, transcending social expectations, and demonstrated the true depth of his character. Mrs. Rivera's anger overflowed, and she took out her frustration on the remaining students. Muttering to herself, "He's going to regret this," her voice grew louder as she warned the class, "and you're all going to regret this, too." The atmosphere in the room became tense as her uncontrolled anger painted a cloud of apprehension. Chet, one of the students, broke the uneasy silence by asking, "So, is the party cancelled?" His question echoed ominously, and the class started buzzing with anxious chatter. As the son of the event's main sponsor, Lucas held significant influence over the proceedings, and Mrs. Rivera was well aware of this fact. She feared that Lucas' displeasure might affect his father's sponsorship decision, potentially turning their grand event into a mere gathering in the high school gymnasium. This possibility infuriated her, and she directed her anger towards Stella, whom she blamed for disrupting her carefully laid plans. Mrs. Rivera saw Stella's economic hardships as a potential catalyst for the downfall of the graduation party she had envisioned. Meanwhile, Lucas sought out Stella and found her sitting by the creek, her mind occupied with tossing pebbles into the calm waters. When she noticed Lucas' presence, she didn't turn around, but he silently approached and sat down beside her. They shared a comfortable silence for a while before Stella finally spoke up, her determination evident in her tone. "I'm just going to pick up my diploma and leave this place." Lucas, with concern etching lines on his usually cheerful face, asked, "Where will you go? What are you going to do?" Stella replied, "I don't know. I'll just get out there." In this moment of uncertainty, Lucas showed his support by simply being there for Stella, even without having all the answers. Their friendship, built on understanding and genuine care, proved to be a source of strength during challenging times. "I'll try to get a job and maybe go to community college. I don't know, but one thing's for sure, I can't stay here anymore," Stella explained, her voice revealing a mixture of determination and fear. Lucas sighed heavily, letting the silence envelop them once again. He picked up a few pebbles, imitating Stella's earlier actions, and tossed them into the stream. They sat there, their eyes fixed on the rippling water, until Lucas broke the silence with an unexpected question. "Can I come with you?" Stella was taken aback by his inquiry and turned to him, confused. "Why do you want to come with me?" she asked. In response, Lucas merely looked at her, his face carrying a melancholic expression, leaving his question hanging in the air between them. As evening descended, Stella returned home to find her parents in the kitchen, sharing a bottle of cheap whiskey. They were arguing over something trivial, their voices sharp with frustration. When they saw Stella, they fell silent, fixing their eyes on her. "There she is. We're having dinner, Stella. Join us," her father, Samuel, gestured towards an empty seat. Stella stood in the doorway, her expression a picture of weary determination. "Aren't you tired of all this? Aren't you tired of getting drunk for no real reason? Are you just waiting for life to pass you by?" Stella's voice echoed in the room, her questions hitting a nerve. Samuel's eyes widened as he looked at his daughter. "What are you talking about? You just want us to bite the dust as soon as possible, huh? You don't like this life? Try living your own. You think we're the only ones living like this? Half the country is in the same damn mess. What about the other half? Why aren't we part of that half?" Stella challenged, her voice trembling with suppressed anger. "Tell me, how much do you waste on alcohol? How much?" Her words hit like a sharp blade, revealing the painful truth of her circumstances. The fact that she was being excluded from the graduation party due to her family's reputation stung deeply. Overwhelmed with frustration, Stella stormed out of the kitchen, seeking solace in the relative calm of her bedroom. As she reached for her suitcase, ready to leave, she confronted the bitter reality that she had very little to pack. Her possessions were as few as her options, making the gravity of her situation even more heart-wrenching. With this stark realization, Stella collapsed onto her bed, succumbing to the waves of despair that washed over her. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring her vision as she allowed herself to cry, mourning her circumstances and the life she felt forced to leave behind. In the midst of her sorrow, Stella lost track of time, caught up in a whirlwind of emotions. She felt stranded in a world where parental love seemed scarce, where dreams seemed to crumble before they could take shape. The heavy weight of her reality pressed down on her, shattering her heart with every thought of the life she was about to endure. Her room, her only refuge, bore witness to her silent cries and absorbed the echoes of her despair. Sometime later, Stella felt the bed sink as someone took a seat beside her. Lifting her tear-stained face, she found her father sitting there, his gaze fixed on a spot on the wall. "You're right, Stella. You're absolutely right. I'm weak," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "It just drives me to drink more, you know." In this moment of vulnerability, Stella saw a glimpse of her father's pain and struggles. The complexities of their family's situation became more apparent, and the chasm between them seemed to narrow, if only for a fleeting moment. To stop thinking about it. To escape it. If you want to leave, you can. Go wherever you want if you don't like it here. I guarantee you anywhere is better than this place, Stella's father uttered with a mix of regret and resignation. Through her lingering tears, Stella sat up, about to speak, but her father gently cut her off. "I know exactly what you're going to say. I can't change. Not right now. Maybe later." He reached into the back pocket of his grease-stained jeans and pulled out an envelope. Tears welled in his eyes as he looked at it, quickly wiping them away with his rough hand. "I started putting money away a long time ago. Before all this," he said, gesturing at his worn-out clothes. "Funny thing is, even on my worst days, when I had nothing to drink, I never touched that money." He took Stella's hand and placed the envelope in her palm. "It's not much, but it should be enough to get you started." With that, Samuel fell silent, rising unsteadily and leaning against the wall for support. He slowly walked out of Stella's room, leaving her with the envelope and a glimpse of the remorse that lurked beneath his hardened exterior. From the kitchen, Stella heard her mother's voice, harsh and loud. "What are you looking at? Pour some more." Her mother's demand snapped Stella back to reality. Despite the moment of honesty she had just shared with her father, it was painfully clear that her family's struggles were far from over. As the morning sun began to break through the horizon, Stella found herself on an outbound bus, leaving her town behind. Her heart weighed heavy in her chest, but there was also a sense of relief and a glimmer of hope for what lay ahead. Their journey into the unknown had begun. After the formal graduation ceremony, Lucas seemed to vanish into thin air. No one sought him out, their complacency fueled by his father's assurance that he would still pay for the event and the gifts for the teachers. Despite the uncertain path ahead, Stella knew she had her friends' unwavering support and the resources to carve out a new life for herself, far from the troubles of her past. To stop thinking about it. To escape it. If you want to leave, you can. Go wherever you want if you don't like it here. I guarantee you anywhere is better than this place, Stella's father uttered with a mix of regret and resignation. Through her lingering tears, Stella sat up, about to speak, but her father gently cut her off. I know exactly what you're going to say. I can't change. Not right now. Maybe later. He reached into the back pocket of his grease-stained jeans and pulled out an envelope. Tears welled in his eyes as he looked at it, quickly wiping them away with his rough hand. I started putting money away a long time ago. Before all this, he said, gesturing at his worn-out clothes. Funny thing is, even on my worst days, when I had nothing to drink, I never touched that money. He took Stella's hand and placed the envelope in her palm. It's not much, but it should be enough to get you started. With that, Samuel fell silent, rising unsteadily and leaning against the wall for support. He slowly walked out of Stella's room, leaving her with the envelope and a glimpse of the remorse that lurked beneath his hardened exterior. From the kitchen, Stella heard her mother's voice, harsh and loud. What are you looking at? Pour some more. Her mother's demand snapped Stella back to reality. Despite the moment of honesty she had just shared with her father, it was painfully clear that her family's struggles were far from over. As the morning sun began to break through the horizon, Stella found herself on an outbound bus, leaving her town behind. Her heart weighed heavy in her chest, but there was also a sense of relief and a glimmer of hope for what lay ahead. Their journey into the unknown had begun. After the formal graduation ceremony, Lucas seemed to vanish into thin air. No one sought him out, their complacency fueled by his father's assurance that he would still pay for the event and the gifts for the teachers. Despite the uncertain path ahead, Stella knew she had her friends' unwavering support and the resources to carve out a new life for herself, far from the troubles of her past. Don't play dumb. You remember that she was an alcoholic, right? I have no idea what she's done with her life, but she looked so affected. I didn't even ask about Stella. I'm pretty sure she ended up just like her parents. I sincerely hope she doesn't find out about this reunion. The two friends conversed, their words tinged with gossip and concern. Oblivious to the irony of their discussion, they laughed together. A decade had passed since the students of New Bridge High walked its halls, and now the alumni were gathering for a reunion. The school's parking lot filled with cars, most belonging to those who had chosen to stay in their hometown and live within the familiar confines of New Bridge. Mrs. Rivera, the teacher in charge of the event, decided to greet everyone outside in the beautiful weather before moving into the gymnasium. Excited chatter filled the air as former classmates reunited, some seeing each other for the first time since graduation day. They eagerly shared updates and anecdotes from their lives over the past decade. Concerned about one of her former students, Mrs. Rivera approached Sydney. You don't look so good. Are you feeling okay? She asked worriedly. Sydney smiled and replied, I'm fine. A little food should fix me up. Mrs. Rivera detected a strong smell of alcohol on Sydney's breath and instinctively stepped back, surveying her with a cautious eye. Tim, once an eager and helpful student, now stood as a gaunt figure covered in tattoos, exuding a harsh demeanor. Mrs. Rivera had heard rumors of his involvement in drug dealing and robbery, which seemed to be true based on his appearance. Natalie, another former student, shared her struggles as a mother of 3 with an alcoholic husband. The scene was somber and bleak, leaving Mrs. Rivera with a sinking feeling. It was evident that many of her former students had undergone significant changes since their high school days. Mrs. Rivera was about to lead everyone inside when someone asked, "Do you know if Lucas Lewis is coming?" "I mean, his dad sponsored all of this. It would make sense for him to be here, right?" "Unsure," she replied, "I'm not sure, but I think he should be." Just as she spoke, a large, sleek limousine pulled up to the school's entrance, catching everyone's attention. "Ah, there he is. Our very own honor student, Lucas," Mrs. Rivera exclaimed, stepping back toward the car with wide eyes. Indeed, it was Lucas stepping out, dressed impeccably, but he didn't head straight inside. Instead, he walked to the passenger side and opened the door, extending his hand to help a young woman step out. The woman emerged gracefully, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. She was elegantly dressed, exuding an aura of strength and success. When she turned around, Mrs. Rivera was completely stunned. Someone in the crowd suddenly exclaimed, "Wait a minute. Isn't that the perfume mogul? Her face is all over the billboards in the malls. That's definitely her. Wow, so she's Lucas' girlfriend." Whispers rippled through the crowd as classmates marveled at the radiant young woman beside Lucas. Her face seemed strangely familiar to Mrs. Rivera, who studied her features intently. The crowd fell into a hushed silence as the couple approached. Lucas broke the silence, saying, "Indeed, money speaks volumes. It separates people from the rest." He then turned to Mrs. Rivera and greeted her warmly, "Hello, Mrs. Rivera. Look at you. You've grown into such a handsome man." Mrs. Rivera was momentarily flustered, but she quickly composed herself, ready to be introduced to Lucas' partner. However, Lucas grinned and continued, "I didn't think I would have to introduce you. Don't you recognize one of your old students?" The woman smiled, "Hello again, Mrs. Rivera. I can't say I'm thrilled to see you, but this event wouldn't be the same without you." Stunned, Mrs. Rivera asked, "Stella, right? Is that you?" The crowd fell silent as Stella confirmed her identity. "Yes, it's me." "Wow, I can't believe it. How could you? I mean, you've changed so much. Or maybe you just noticed the clothes I was wearing and ignored who I was underneath. Isn't that how you remember people?" Stella's words were sharp and direct, cutting through the air. Mrs. Rivera stumbled in her response, trying to defend herself, but Stella saw through the attempt. "Back then, we had a sponsor for the graduation, and we didn't want to." Mrs. Rivera began, but she quickly realized that she was lying in front of that very sponsor's son. Lucas knew that his father didn't care about appearances. Mrs. Rivera hastily changed the subject and announced, "All right, everyone's here. Let's go inside." As she held the door open for the couple, Lucas stopped, turned to her, and said, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Rivera, but I don't want my wife to be associated with someone who judges people based on appearances and lies about it." With that, Lucas and Stella walked away, leaving Mrs. Rivera speechless and reflecting on the consequences of her past actions. The crowd watched in amazement as the couple, now reunited after a decade, moved on with their heads held high. It was a reunion filled with unexpected twists and revelations, showing that true change and growth can come from facing the past with honesty and integrity. Maybe you'd be more comfortable somewhere else. So feel free to go home, Lucas said with a calm but firm tone, addressing Mrs. Rivera. The crowd fell into stunned silence as the couple walked gracefully into the gymnasium. "And just for your information," Lucas added with a sly grin, "I organized today's event, not my father. Don't bother trying to contact him about it." His voice simmered with the anger he had suppressed for the woman who had once embarrassed his wife in front of everyone. He had originally planned a more grandiose revenge, but it was Stella who had convinced him to tone it down. Lucas and Stella had been inseparable since their high school graduation, a full decade ago. When Stella decided to start a new life and moved to the city, Lucas was not far behind. He tracked her down, his determination never wavering. But it wasn't easy to convince Stella to accept him, considering their very different backgrounds. After all, he was the scion of a wealthy family, while she was the child of struggling alcoholics. During their reunion in the suburbs, Stella expressed her concern, "Lucas, I care about you. I really love you. But I don't want you to disappoint your parents because of me. Do you really want to be with someone like me? Someone who doesn't conform to your social status? All I long for is an escape from the harsh judgment." To which Lucas replied, "Stella, my family is my family. But if I were so hung up on our differences, would I have rejected the privileged life of a private school? My father's wealth holds no sway over me. I'm here to create my own destiny, and I want to build that future with you." As she listened to his earnest declaration, a profound realization dawned on Stella. Perhaps all the trials and tribulations she had experienced were meant to lead her to someone as understanding and accepting as Lucas. For the first few months of their journey together, the young couple poured their hearts and souls into every job opportunity that came their way. The idea of pursuing higher education didn't even cross their minds. Their focus was solely on making ends meet, a goal they achieved in the early years of their life together. Stella didn't worry about their financial limitations because she had grown accustomed to living on a shoestring. She had seen the bottom, metaphorically speaking, and learned to navigate it. Lucas, on the other hand, brought a different perspective to her struggles. A childhood spent watching his father make shrewd business decisions equipped him with a pragmatic mindset and a strong drive to learn and grow. Soon their unique backgrounds and experiences converged, creating a powerful synergy that would lead to something extraordinary. As her income began to grow, Stella developed a keen interest in luxuries she had never been able to afford in her youth. In particular, her newfound fascination with perfume led to a series of revelations. She began to see ways in which perfume packaging and marketing could be significantly improved. The combination of her life experiences, her eye for details others might overlook, and her newfound interest in a product that symbolized a life she'd never had began to come together in the most unexpected ways. Her modest one-bedroom apartment quickly became a dual-purpose space, serving as both an office and a modest warehouse for her budding startup. Orders began pouring in at an astonishing rate, soon outpacing their ability to keep up. They found themselves in a whirlwind of success they could hardly have imagined. A year later, the young couple's tireless efforts had borne fruit beyond their wildest dreams. They now own a chain of 12 stores scattered throughout the city, a testament to their diligence, perseverance, and the power of their synergistic partnership. One day, as the two of them sat together, Stella couldn't help but express her vulnerability. "Lucas, of all the beautiful girls out there, why did you choose me?" she asked, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "First things first, let's get this straight. For me, you are the most beautiful of all," Lucas replied, his eyes softening. "But your beauty isn't just physical. Your humility truly sets you apart." Stella looked at him, her heart swelling with love and gratitude for the man who had seen her worth beyond appearances. Their journey together had been filled with challenges and transformations, but it was their mutual support and appreciation for each other that had led them to this extraordinary place in their lives. As they sat there, hand in hand, they knew that they were destined for greatness as long as they faced the world together. Stella hesitated for a moment, listening to their conversation from the shadows. Her heart softened as she witnessed Mrs. Rivera's vulnerability. She knew all too well the weight of carrying past mistakes and the fear of facing those we've hurt. Taking a deep breath, Stella stepped forward, revealing her presence. "Mrs. Rivera," she said gently, "you don't need to ask for my forgiveness. We all make mistakes, and I've learned that holding on to grudges only weighs us down. I want to move forward, and that includes letting go of the pain you caused me in the past. I hope we can find a way to understand and support each other going forward." Mrs. Rivera looked up, her eyes wide with surprise and gratitude. "Stella, I'm so sorry for everything," she stammered, her voice catching. "I wish I had been a better teacher to you, and I deeply regret my past actions. Please know that I'm trying to change and become a better person." Stella smiled warmly. "We all have room for growth and change," she replied. "I've learned that compassion and forgiveness can be powerful tools for healing, both for ourselves and for others. I believe in second chances, and I hope we can find a way to support each other in our journeys." The construction teacher nodded approvingly, sensing the moment of reconciliation between the two women. "It takes strength to admit our mistakes and seek forgiveness," he said. "You're both showing great courage today." Mrs. Rivera wiped away a tear, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaky but sincere. "I will do my best to be a better teacher and a better person from now on." With that, the three of them stood together, united in a moment of understanding and forgiveness. Stella felt a weight lift from her shoulders, and she knew that this day had turned into something even more profound than revenge. It had become a day of growth, healing, and reconciliation. As she walked away from the school with Lucas, she felt a renewed sense of hope and gratitude for the journey they had taken together and the promising future that lay ahead. "I do, absolutely," he assured her. Unbeknownst to them, Stella was standing by the door, listening to the conversation. Her heart pounded in her chest as she took a deep breath and prepared to confront Mrs. Rivera. Surprise flashed across the faces of both Mrs. Rivera and Mr. Black as Stella knocked lightly on the door before entering the room. Her calm demeanor was in stark contrast to the shocked expressions she was met with. "Hello, Mr. Black," Stella greeted the construction teacher first, nodding respectfully. He flashed a surprised but pleased smile at her acknowledgement. Turning to Mrs. Rivera, Stella's face softened. "Mrs. Rivera." "About what happened earlier," she began, choosing her words carefully, "I just want to say that Lucas didn't mean to hurt you. He was just trying to support me and make me feel better. But to be honest, it made me feel worse." Her voice carried a sincerity that filled the room, echoing off the walls of the quiet shop. As the words left Stella's mouth, a sudden realization dawned on her. She was dangerously close to becoming a reflection of the person who had once bullied her. It was a sobering thought that made her cringe. After inviting Mrs. Rivera back to the gym, the older woman's eyes filled with tears. Unable to hold back any longer, Mrs. Rivera broke down and began to cry, her apologies tumbling out in a rush. She expressed remorse for her past actions and sincerely apologized to Stella, an unexpected display of vulnerability that touched everyone in the room. Their reunion turned out to be an incredibly fun event. Lucas, once a quiet and distant student, was now at the center of the celebration, swaying gracefully on the dance floor with his wife, Stella. The gym, a space that held countless memories for both of them, became their dance floor, echoing with their laughter and the melody of a decades-old song. The night was a testament to the power of forgiveness, growth, and the strength of their friendship. The past was not forgotten, but it no longer held them captive. Instead, it became a part of their shared history, a stepping stone that led them to where they stood today. As the evening drew to a close, Stella and Lucas stood under the starlit sky, hand in hand, and a sense of contentment settled over them. The journey that had begun with hardship and struggle had blossomed into a beautiful story of resilience, love, and understanding. And as they looked forward to the next chapter of their lives, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. For they had learned that it was not the circumstances that defined them, but the strength of their spirits and the depth of their connection. Thank you for being part of our storytelling family. We'll see you in the next adventure.